today I'm going to share the story of how Phoenix is reinventing itself into a lean desert city. And I know I'm talking to a bunch of urbanists about Phoenix, so I hope, because we're here in Dallas, that you'll be a little bit more open to this story and be willing to come along with me on this journey. So for those that don't know a lot about Phoenix, Phoenix is located in the Salt River Valley. It is a place where 4 rivers once collided. It is a city that is built on the Hohokam ruins, a civilization that lasted for 2,000 years. It is also a city that is very young. It is just a little bit over 100 years old. And because of that youth, it is a city that is open to new ideas, to experimenting, to trying things a little bit differently. And because of these qualities, along with it being a place that has a very transitory population, so as a young person, you can really kind of come in and make a name for yourself very quickly and be a part of changing and transforming the city, which is just such an incredible opportunity to be a part of. It is also a state that has deep libertarian roots. And so this means that we're a little bit skeptical of regulation and not so into enforcement and really kind of having a hands-off type of approach. And so these qualities and these characteristics have really kind of created a fertile ground for lean urbanism and has allowed an amazing group of energetic, interesting, committed citizens to come in and start the process of revitalizing our central core, one block and one neighborhood at a time. Then the recession hit, and it changed Phoenix. In less than 4 years, we saw the loss of $300 million in revenues, and we're still continuing to see budget cuts. And this put the city in a free fall, and it really kind of showed us that this over-reliance in large-scale development on our edges was very fragile, and there was vitality in our urban core in these small-scale redevelopments. And kind of recognizing and seeing this bright spot in a very dark and gloomy time, city staff started to see this vitality and started to see how these creative makers and small business owners and developers and artists and creative entrepreneurs and restaurateurs were being able to create vibrancy in places in ways that no one ever thought possible. And doing it in such a way that it was overshadowing these big, massive investments that the city had made in trying to revitalize our downtown. And seeing that with just some dilapidated buildings and some vacant lots, they could create the largest First Friday art walk in the country. Over 10,000 people come to downtown once a month to walk our streets and to shop and to experience our city. And it was literally done with benches and with rehabbing buildings, and a lot of it was done under the radar without necessarily the support of the city. So recognizing the value that was there and this vitality that was being created, the city started to partner with these creative entrepreneurs, these developers, these planners, these civil servants that saw this opportunity. And today I'm going to share with you some of the tools that we've developed over these last 8 years. So the first tool that we've really kind of started, or strategy that we've really started playing with, was to build partnerships. Residents and our professionals and our nonprofit organizations are our greatest assets, and because of the complicated city structure and the way we just do business, it was really hard for them to engage and be involved in this. And the mayor from Fort Worth spoke about this last night in her community as well, of how so many residents are frustrated and feel like they can't participate, that they can't contribute to their community. So Phoenix has really put an effort into supporting the creation of an ecosystem of organizations and really kind of tapping into them and using them as a platform to efficiently engage and work with and collaborate with a large group of people. The second strategy and toolkit that we've kind of undertaken is to nurture relationships and abilities. These organizations are just not going to happen on their own, and if they do, there's a limitation to what they can do. And so it's really kind of part of our responsibility as a city to help develop those relationships as well as their abilities to take on more and more. Another kind of important kind of piece to this is in Phoenix we have a really kind of strange relationships with our residents. It's codependent, you could call it. And we're really kind of taking on things that are not appropriate for the city to be involved in. It's amazing how many phone calls I get to, have people ask me to help them find their next house. Like, I'm expected as a civil servant to help you find your next house and do all the research for it. I mean, so it's just kind of out of whack, and I think our budgets are showing this disconnect that's occurring between our citizens and between our cities. And so I think the bigger kind of picture with these two tools is to understand that a resilient and sustainable built environment is built on the foundation of a healthy and strong urban social fabric. And so these kind of pieces, the people pieces, are really important kind of is really kind of the foundation or the keystone to making a lot of this stuff happen and not to end up with the externalities that can occur. So one of another tools that we kind of undertook was to reduce red tape. And so we started experimenting with various types of pink zones. And the first one that we really kind of undertook was overlay districts. And so the idea behind these is to maintain the underlying zoning and just slightly modify it, and just kind of, and recognizing that the way our current regulation is set up, that it's blanketed for the entire city. So our standards that are being applied in downtown are also being applied at the very edges of our city. And these overlay districts allow us kind of an easy and simple way to go in and just start to modify it. And what's nice about it is it's not trying to take on such a big reform that it doesn't stir up as much controversy, and it's just kind of a simple way to start to fix the problems. The next program that we started was the adaptive reuse program, and this is really quite a phenomenal program. It started in the depths of the recession. So in April 2008, we looked at how can we make it easier for small businesses to open up, because we started recognizing that there were some that could fly under the radar and just do it and would take that risk, but a lot of folks wanted to do the right thing. They wanted to have permits. They wanted to, be legitimate businesses, but in order to build the places that we said we wanted, they had to go through an 18-month entitlement process, get all these variances, and a lot of small businesses found themselves almost bankrupt before they even opened up their door. So recognizing that this was a serious issue, we said, okay, well, let's take a look at it and start to figure out how do we start to reduce some of these technical barriers and make it easier for small businesses to open up. And this really kind of came out of a call from our community. They came to the table and said, this is a serious issue and it needs to be addressed, and we're willing to partner on it. And through that partnership, we developed one of the most comprehensive adaptive reuse programs in the country. And I think it's important to note about our program too is in so many places, adaptive reuse is beautiful historic buildings, they make a lot of sense, but in Phoenix, we're taking really crappy, ugly, stucco, nasty buildings and turning them into these amazing community spaces, and kind of demonstrating that you can take something that really is a liability and turn it into an asset. And then the last phase of our pink zones has been the infill development incentive process. And this has really kind of been broken down into 3 processes. The first was really focused on the technical pieces of it. So really kind of saying, what are those workarounds that a lot of our connected developers know, a lot of our developers that have been working for some time know how to ask and where to ask and when to ask it. And so just kind of making those by right to anybody that works within a certain area in Phoenix. The other piece of it was looking at, was a response to a request from our development community saying, we have an opportunity to go after a pot of funding, of single-family housing funding, if we can get it to, and use that to fund townhomes, which we desperately need in Phoenix. We basically have apartments and we have single-family housings and barely anything in the middle. And so recognizing that this was a housing type that we really needed to get into our city and support, our management really looked at how can we work the building code and how can we work our zoning ordinance to kind of meet that financial criteria so that they can get that money but still look and feel like a townhome. And so we adopted that about a year ago. The other piece of it is looking at parking requirements, stormwater retention requirements, and just reducing those and just making those less onerous to those developers, so that way projects like you see on the screen are actually feasible and possible and are legitimate. The other strategy that we've really kind of undertaken, and this is, a little bit more to the tactical side, you could say, is to fill in the gaps and to start to activate our vacant lots. 42% of Phoenix is vacant land. And especially within our central corridor, there is so much of it because of urban renewal, because of speculation and the demolition of so much of our building stock. And so understanding that development was going to come during this recession and we needed to do something in the meantime to keep it going, to keep revitalizing the neighborhood, to keep the activity coming into the community. And so our local arts community started playing with different vacant lot activations. So taking tents and creating art markets, creating parks out of vacant lots, shipping containers as galleries and cafes and all those great things. And what's been really amazing about this process is it's really been a way for our entrepreneurs to get a foot in the door and to start small businesses. So several of our artists as well as our food trucks have actually turned into brick and mortar stores. And so it's really an amazing strategy just to kind of give that entry level and an opportunity for young people to take a risk and start a business. The last strategy that we've undertaken is to establish walkable streets. And this is really this idea behind successional streets. Phoenix's streets are very, very wide. And cars travel down them very, very quickly. And what we were hearing from our community is that these streets were holding back the development of our city and really kind of preventing us from becoming a walkable place. And so we've started working on kind of 3 different approaches to it. The first is just a restriping project. We were trying to fix these blocks at the height of the market, we were spending about $1 million a block to fix these streets. And we were fixing them in a way that was really an interim fix, because right now, like I said, we're in a really awkward phase of our development. We want to be walkable, but yet we're still car dominated. And so we need to be able to allow more cars and more parking, but is that something that we really want to have in 20, 30, 40 years from now, and do we really want to put that in concrete and make it, finalized? And I think the other kind of interesting piece with all of it too is a lot of our neighborhoods, you just don't know really what kind of place they're going to be. They were significantly damaged, and a lot of them have a lot of vacant lots and, dilapidated buildings, so it's really not clear what this place is going to be. And so often we come in and we put in the streetscape assuming, oh, this is going to be a commercial corridor, and then it turns out to be a residential corridor. And so I think this approach of the striping projects or using epoxy paint and planters kind of allows the street to evolve alongside with the city. And this is one of the projects that I got to work on with the Grand Avenue Merchants Association, where in 2 years, so from our lean charrette to implementation of the first phase, it was less than 2 years and cost less than $70,000. And it's amazing the impact that it's had on that area. We've seen 9 new businesses open up since then, and there are several more on the books. And we're getting on the street the first shipping container housing project west of the Mississippi. So it's a great example of how simple, small investments can create big changes that can lead to further revitalization. retrofitting our streets is converting our barren landscape strips into water harvesting landscapes. So Phoenix has this, Phoenix was once the cities of garden and trees, and it once had all these majestic trees that lined our streets, because we knew, back in the day that in order to live in the desert, we needed shade. And so they incorporated that into our infrastructure. Well, with the decline of our central city, all those places were left barren. And so what do we do with them? We're in a drought, we have all these challenges, so we've started working with a nonprofit organization that originally was rogue and just was like doing this on their own, and eventually they became legitimate and then now are actually a nonprofit and are partnering with the city on these types of projects. And because we have these wide planter strips, so they go from anywhere from 8 to 25 feet, we're able to very simply create a slope that allows the water to go in via a curb cut or a core, and then feeds that landscape. And it really doesn't, you can't really tell that it's a basin. So it doesn't really look like it's actually capturing water. And after a year and a half of hand watering it, we can take these off of water and they can sustain themselves completely on rainwater, which is an incredible feat, I think, in Arizona. As long as the trees are drought tolerant, I have to make that plug. The other piece of it is we've just started a parklet program. And so the first one was built by the city, and it was done in partnership with a local contractor, a local architect, and a local business that all donated their time to just kind of see what this would look like. And it was really kind of the city's way of just kind of testing it and seeing if this is something we would be interested in, which I've noticed with working especially with engineers, that can be a very helpful way to kind of work around with them, is to have the city do the first one and then hand it over to the private sector. And so after 6 months of that project being installed, we have our parklet policy, and we're about to launch our toolkit for our parklets that will allow businesses to customize their parklet, not have to hire a designer, and have a streamlined permitting process. So these are all just kind of some of the simple ways that Phoenix is starting to reinvent itself and kind of rethink the city. And a lot of it, I think, is because of the community and that relationship and that collaboration between the city. One of the things that I've really kind of taken away from this process is the city can't do this alone, that we really need our community and our relationship. And as a city staffer, there's only so much that I can do within City Hall, but having that relationship with the community allows projects to happen a lot faster than I ever thought possible. So this is Phoenix's story, very brief and very short, but there is some good stuff happening there, and I invite you to come during our fall and our spring. It's beautiful there, and experience the good stuff that's happening. So thank you.